In the heart of the sleepy town of Silentvale stood a mansion that no one dared approach. A house bathed in an enchanting golden glow by day, but swallowed by impenetrable darkness by night. Whispers of vanished souls and shadowy secrets haunted the town, yet no one had dared to uncover the truth. That is, until Ethan Rivers, a fearless historian with a thirst for the unknown, arrived. Little did he know, stepping into the house would mean stepping into a world where light and shadow waged a deadly war, and he was the only one who could tip the balance. The city of light and shadows, in a small, quaint town called Silentvale, life moved at a gentle pace. The mornings were kissed by a soft blanket of mist, and the evenings bathed in the golden hues of the setting sun. Silentvale wasn't the kind of place you'd expect mysteries to unfold. Yet, at its heart, stood a crumbling old mansion that gripped the imagination of every soul in the town. Locals called it the House of Light and Shadows. The house was peculiar. During the day, it would shimmer with an inexplicable glow, as if the sunlight danced off its walls in ways no other structure could manage. But come nightfall, it would be swallowed in a darkness so deep, it seemed as though the house itself had disappeared, leaving only an ominous void. Nobody dared approach it. Elders in the town swore by chilling tales of people who had entered the house, never to return. "The house breathes," they would whisper, "and it feeds on whoever steps inside." Things took a turn one autumn afternoon when a stranger arrived in Silentvale. His name was Ethan Rivers, a young historian with a knack for uncovering lost stories. He had heard about the House of Light and Shadows from an old book that mentioned mysterious structures across the countryside. Driven by curiosity and a love for adventure, Ethan decided to visit the infamous town. Walking into Silentvale, Ethan noticed the cautious glances of the townsfolk. Children playing by the roadside stopped and stared at him. Shopkeepers paused mid-sale, their eyes narrowing with suspicion. At the local inn, where Ethan checked in, the innkeeper, Mrs. Grayson, was the first to break the silence. "You're not from around here, are you?" she asked, her voice a mix of concern and warning. "No, ma'am," Ethan replied with a polite smile. "I'm here to learn more about that house in the middle of town. The one everyone seems to avoid." Mrs. Grayson paled. She leaned in closer and whispered, "If you're smart, you'll leave it alone. That place has taken enough lives." But Ethan wasn't one to back down. "Every legend has a source, Mrs. Grayson. I just want to uncover the truth." She shook her head, muttering something about foolish young men, and handed him his room key. The next morning, Ethan set out to explore the mansion. From a distance, it looked ordinary, just a dilapidated building with ivy creeping up its walls. But as he got closer, he felt a strange warmth, as if the air around the house was alive. The door creaked open at the slightest push, revealing an interior bathed in golden light. Dust motes danced in the air, but the light felt unnatural, as if it didn't belong to the sun outside. Ethan took a cautious step inside. The house was eerily silent, yet it didn't feel abandoned. Furniture sat in perfect condition, and the air smelled faintly of lavender, as though someone had just left the room. Ethan pulled out his notebook, scribbling observations. But as he moved deeper into the house, the light began to change. It turned colder, dimmer. Shadows stretched unnaturally across the walls, twisting and writhing like living creatures. Then he heard it, a faint whisper. "Who's there?" Ethan called, his voice steady but his heart racing. The whisper didn't stop. Instead, it grew louder, forming words. "Leave, while you can." A cold chill ran down his spine. Ethan backed away, his instincts screaming at him to run. But just as he reached the door, it slammed shut on its own. Ethan managed to escape the house that day, but he knew he couldn't stop there. He needed answers. That evening, he visited the town's library, hoping to find some records about the mansion's history. The librarian, an elderly man named Mr. Whitaker, seemed reluctant to help at first. But when Ethan explained his experience, the old man sighed and pulled out a dusty ledger. "This town has buried its secrets for too long," Mr. Whitaker said. "The house you entered belonged to the Calloway family. They were once the wealthiest family in Silentvale, but they dabbled in things they shouldn't have." "What do you mean?" Ethan asked. Mr. Whitaker leaned closer. "Legends say the Calloway struck a deal with the shadows. They wanted power, wealth, and influence, and in return, they offered the house as a gateway, a bridge between our world and something else. But the shadows are greedy. They took more than the Calloways bargained for, starting with their lives. Since then, anyone who enters that house risks being claimed by them." Ethan frowned. "But why does the house glow during the day?" "The light is a trap," Mr. Whitaker replied. "It draws people in, and once night falls, the shadows consume them." Ethan knew he had to return to the house, but this time he would be prepared. He gathered supplies, a flashlight, a recorder, a pocket knife, and returned just before sunset. As he stepped inside, the house seemed to recognize him. The golden light flickered, and the whispers began almost immediately. But Ethan pressed on, determined to uncover the truth. In the heart of the mansion, he found a spiral staircase leading down to a hidden basement. The air grew colder with each step, and the whispers turned into an eerie chorus. At the bottom of the stairs, Ethan discovered a massive mirror, its surface rippling like water. As he approached, a figure emerged from the reflection. A woman, with hollow eyes and shadowy tendrils flowing from her body. "Who are you?" Ethan demanded. "I was Eleanor Calloway," the figure replied, her voice both sorrowful and menacing. "And now, I am the keeper of this house." Ethan realized. She was trapped, bound to the house by the very deal her family had made. "Can you be freed?" he asked. Eleanor hesitated. "Only if the gateway is closed. But the shadows will not let you. They will fight to keep their bridge open." Determined to help Eleanor and end the house's reign of terror, Ethan searched the basement for clues. He found an ancient book filled with symbols and incantations, likely the very ritual the Calloways had used to summon the shadows. As he began chanting the reversal spell, the house came alive. Shadows burst from every corner, clawing at him, trying to snuff out his light. But Ethan held his ground, using his flashlight to fend them off as he continued the incantation. The shadows screamed, their forms twisting and disintegrating as the spell took effect. The golden light of the house began to fade, replaced by a pure, natural darkness. Finally, with one last burst of energy, the shadows were gone. The mirror shattered, and Eleanor's figure dissolved into a peaceful glow. "Thank you," her voice whispered one last time before disappearing. The next morning, Silentvale woke to find the mansion gone, replaced by an empty field. The townsfolk were both relieved and confused, but Ethan knew the truth. As he packed his bags to leave, Mrs. Grayson approached him. "You've done something remarkable, haven't you?" she said, her eyes glinting with gratitude. Ethan smiled. "Just uncovering the truth, Mrs. Grayson. Nothing more." But as he walked away, he couldn't shake the feeling that his journey with the shadows wasn't entirely over. Somewhere out there, another story waited to be uncovered. Another mystery to be solved.